Hello again, Struckpup. Today I'm bringing you another build video for Warhammer Chaosbane. This one is for Bragi, Axebiter and the Slayer class, and it's more of a fun take on a spin to win Whirlwind build. I decided to go with Dawi's Whirlwind Slayer build, and it may not be a meta build, it may not do 100 million and 100 million plus damage like the Strike of the Anvil builds, but it can still do Chaos 9, not as fast, but it can still complete it, although probably it's best if you use this in upgraded relic hunts on Chaos 8 or up to Chaos 8, so that you don't have to worry that much about surviving and survivability, and focus on just killing stuff, spinning, winning, and doing all that goodness that comes with it. Overall, I found out that this build doesn't work that great with the Grimnir, and I never even tried it with the Everpeak set, but it does work amazing with the challenge set, and it works okay with the Last Song set. So you will be seeing footage of me playing both sets, the Last Songs and the challenge. The Last Song doesn't do as much damage normally, but once you stun enemies and cause them to bleed, then you do decent damage, almost as much, maybe even more than the challenge set does. Although with the challenge set you don't need to make the enemies bleed to get that much damage on them. So as you can see here, you would be seeing 1, 2, 3 million hits, but when I stun the enemies and make them bleed, with the Whirlwind I can do 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. The big numbers would be numbers from Blood of the Mountain, and Blood of the Mountain does extra 50% damage to bleeding enemies, and since the set, the Last Song set, lets us do another 300%, that's 350% extra damage for Blood of the Mountain, and 300 for the spin to win stuff. There's lots of ways to customize it. You could use superior or heroic god skills. You could use instead of the avenging charge call to oath. So there's customization, but let's go with the god skills first. So the god skills setup for this build has two versions, which are kind of similar to my crit monster build's two versions. One would be maxing out the damage based on maxing out counterattack damage, so you can see 14% health drain, 148% counterattack damage, and this is we're taking Ancestor's Gift and Ancestor's Gift Superior and going all the way to counterattack damage. Then on this side we are going all the way to Fighting Spirit Mastered, and that's it. Now let's show you the other version. The other version allows us to get 41% health drain versus 14, but we lose 86 counterattack damage. We have 70 versus 148. Okay, it's not 86, it's still 78 counterattack damage less. Pretty much sacrificing a lot of DPS, but getting more cooldown. You see here that's 9% cooldown reduction, here that's 17. And this is probably the suggested version to play because of the health drain and the extra cooldown you get here, and then you also get extra cooldown here, a little bit of crit damage as well. So if you want DPS, take this setup. If you want a little bit more spammability of your cooldown skills, god skills, etc., and maybe a little bit of health drain to help, then get this version. Experiment, see what you like best. But on this side we're getting Fighting Spirit, but you're also getting this cooldown. So there's not that big of a change, but there is a change nevertheless. So now let's show you the skills I like to use for each of the two sets I recommend using with the build. And here's what I recommend for the skills. Since there's two sets I could recommend playing and they require slightly different approaches due to one of them giving a heroic skill, the other one heroic passive, and the heroic passive being completely useless for a build like that one, the way I play it. with the Wasp Song set, we are kind of slightly approaching the situation a little bit differently. You can see the passives here are exactly the same, and this is an empty slot, which you can, if you want, you can even put Duelist Chain Reaction. I mean, you're not gonna get more than one stack most of the time, unless you replace this for Call to Opt. So I'm gonna first go through the challenge set combo. First we have Axe Throw. This is completely optional, pick whatever you want as long as it's a 0 pointer. Whirlwind of Blades Mastered, cost is reduced based on rage level, important. Ancestor's Gift, it could be superior, it could be basic. Blood of the Mountain, it could be superior, it could be basic. If you want the health regeneration, grab the superior, maybe downgrade this one to basic. If you want this damage when you use this, when your HP is low, which it doesn't say what the threshold is, but let's say 30%. Let's say when your potion is telling you that you can use it, maybe that's when this triggers, you get 20% extra damage. So up to you whether you want that one or that one, and then that one or that one. Here Avenging Charge superior, or basic if you want points for something else, for reworking some other things. Another thing that you can do if you think you don't need that survivability, escape mechanic skill, and also it's great mobility throughout the map, you can use Call to Out basic or Call to Out superior based on how many points you've got spare. And then Wasp Bastion heroic, good HP buff, good healing, good energy regen, and also 100% extra damage. Now this is a must-have. Fighting Spirit Mastered, Deadball Mastered must-have. This makes stunned enemies take more damage, and stunning an enemy also inflicts bleeding. And then to top it off, Trail of Blood Mastered, bleeding enemies take more damage. Damage increases based on the number of nearby bleeding enemies. Meaning when you use this, you're gonna be proccing this to stun the enemies, which in fact would proc this, and you would have up to 10 enemies, would mean up to 40% damage more. On top of this 20, on top of this 30, and on top of this 30, which we'll talk about in a moment. So it's pretty nice synergy, and if you replace this with Call to Out, that means you're gonna have two skills that can stun. Even if this doesn't end up stunning, the Ring of Resonance might stun. But I think this stuns by itself, so you don't have to worry about it, whereas this one only stuns when you use Ring of Resonance, which is an invasion ring. More about that in the gear segment. So consider your options, weigh them against each other and see which fits your playstyle, whether you can survive without this, whether you just want the basic one, whether you want the superior one here, then whether you want Call to Out or not. And then let's talk about Unwavering Mastered. Maximum energy increase, damage is increased while you have maximum energy. If you think it's difficult for you to keep your energy at max most of the time, you can remove this, and another great alternative is that one. This would not be 30%, but it would be 20%. You would have your rage up a lot of the time. That means 20% extra damage, one for each point of rage. Also the duration of the rage would be longer, so it's a good alternative. It's a good alternative, and it works well with that build. Now another thing you could consider is actually using Eternal Grudge superior if you downgrade this or this instead of Blessed Talisman. Another thing instead of Blessed Talisman, I tried, I didn't like it is Veteran's Chain Reaction, because it only works on the first hit of your Whirlwind and then it immediately disappears. So it doesn't work for a few seconds until he does a few spins. No, just the first time you hit an enemy and then it's gone. Veteran's Chain Reaction I wouldn't suggest. Duelist Chain Reaction, it could be nice. Even if you just get 100% crit damage most of the time, it's nice. But if you have two cooldown skills, meaning you have Wasp Bastion and then you have Call to Out, and if you're using the version that gives you more cooldown on the God skill tree, such as this version here, where you have more cooldown reduction, that's gonna go very well with the setup. As long as you can keep the chain reactions up, it's a nice thing to have there. Another thing you can try using is padded armor. where again you would have to downgrade maybe this thing or maybe this thing to put padded armor here, or you can use one of those skills here, whichever you want. Master Alchemist, Scroll of the Elders, Blessed Talisman, Master Blacksmiths, even Master Chef, whichever you think you like more. Unfortunately, Whirlwind of Blades does not benefit from movement speed, but things like Grimnir's Bellow make it spin faster, maybe a little bit more hitting. I never tested whether the faster spinning actually results in more hits per second, or whether it's like Wosen, where you're spinning faster but you're still ticking with the exact same speed. The problem is it doesn't move faster, and I think the developers would make this such a nice, even maybe close to a meta build, if they make Whirlwind benefit and move faster. Not spin faster, but move faster when you have movement speed increases, and to also get damage bonus based on that movement speed, like 1% damage per 1% movement speed, or 0.5% damage per 1% movement speed. So I went a little bit off topic, so let's go back to the other set to tell you what's different here. Here you don't have Heroic class Bastion, which means that's 10 points cost skill, which was 0 points before. And we're not using the Heroic skill here because, well, it only buffs the damage over time, and you don't want that. Each attack has a chance to stun bleeding enemies. Is not bad, but again, if your enemies are bleeding, they're already probably stunned or have been stunned, and are probably close to getting killed, unless it's bosses. I don't suggest using that, but if you want to, you can use it instead of Blessed Talisman here. It's an option if you want it. It's 10% chance to stun. Whether it's worth it, I don't think so, but if you want to have that extra bleeding damage, it's gonna be around 1-2 million bleeding damage procs maximum. It adds up, it's okay, it's not great though. So the same things apply to this setup, how to rework this SWAT. You have 3 points. The problem is this is already basic, and this is already basic, and this is already basic. So you only have 3 points to work with for this SWAT. Again, you can still replace this for Eternal Grudge Superior, and that gives you another 4 points. You're losing 10% damage, but you're getting permanent kind of 20% damage. So that 10% loss is not that big of a deal, because you're gonna have this most of the time. And you're gonna have 7 points, which would allow you to put things like Hero of the Desert, Padded Armor, and I actually forgot to say Hero of the Desert being good for the other setup. Even some of those elixirs would work well if you want them to. And this is what I had for the legendary ranks when recording most of the footage in this session for this build. Of course, when you're a new player, you probably would want to focus on one thing. Something that's great would be Legendary Reinforcement. Gives you damage reduction when you use cooldown skills for 5 seconds. Pretty nice, especially if you use more than one cooldown skill. Alternatively, you can focus on the healing. That means while you're using Whirlwind, you have a chance to, or Avenging Charge, you have a chance to heal up. If you are doing easier content and you don't need damage reduction, go for Punishment as well once you've taken Reinforcement, or is an alternative to it. If you want damage reduction and want to prioritize one of those two, get Endurance rather than Crushing. Endurance applies a buff on you, Crushing applies a debuff on the enemy. And if the enemy dies, you need to have hit and procced the Crushing on the other enemy. So this one is trumping Crushing anytime in my book, because this one stays on you, and enemies that are hitting you for the first time, or that you are hitting for the first time, would still get that damage reduction applied to their hits, rather than having to hit them and have Crushing proc, so that you can have that damage reduction as a benefit. So that's pretty much it about the skills. Now let's talk about the items. I suggest using the 2 sets that are good for the build. And here's the gear I would suggest using. First, the Undefeated, the suggested set, the easier, the less risky set, which is easier to survive on, would be the Undefeated. Easier to keep the energy up, easier to keep the HP up, and you have a little bit more points to wiggle and modify the build. The Undefeated set also gives decent damage, so it's not bad at all. It also gives a buff to the whole team for HP, for damage, and yeah, it also regenerates your energy and gives you rage. So apart from that, you would ideally want a good Victor's Tribute, and I don't have a good one. I'm gonna talk about good rolls later, but this one is mediocre and it's decent. You would want a good Grudge Holder. This is kind of decent with just 2 out of 6 wasted rolls on it. Then you would want a Mountain Pendant, ideally, for energy gain if you're using Unwavering. If you're not using Unwavering and if you don't need the cooldown reduction, you can try using God Skills, do more damage, because Blood of the Mountain would benefit from it. Or you can try using something else, like for example heals when using a God Skill. You do have 2 of them if you really need that extra healing. This one could work, but it makes you take more damage, so I wouldn't suggest it, and it could only work for Blood of the Mountain when the enemies are far. For farming you can use Pendant of Taunting, and there is another one that reduces your HP regeneration but gives you damage reduction based on that HP regeneration, Pendant of Valor, which I'm not sure I've got, but let's check. Pendant of Valor, there we go. So yeah, based on how much your HP regeneration, you get more damage reduction. So it reduces your health regeneration by 50%, so it's going to be very difficult to get this to give you good damage reduction. Because the more the health regeneration, the more the damage reduction, but this 50% reduction is a huge blow to builds that are not the lesser. So another thing I want to mention is the rings you would want to use. Ring of Resonance is a must-have if you want that synergy to stun the enemies with Vast Bastion and any other cooldown skill, but there's one more other that stuns by itself and one more other that doesn't stun, but it's not suggested for the build. So Cold Oath is suggested, you can use it as you heard, but avoid Strike of the Anvil, because it just turns the build into something completely different. Fiery Ring of Tori is great. If you don't have a good road, Fiery Ring of Tori, Insulation is not that bad. Where did it go? Here. Insulation Ring is not that bad. Ancestor's Gift is not that bad either. Granite Ring would reduce your damage, so I'm not gonna suggest using it, but it's not a bad idea either. And then if you're not using Unwavering, there is one ring that makes you lose energy when you take damage. But the problem is you're not gonna be able to keep the Whirlwind much if you get hit. So every hit would drain your energy, and it's this one. Damage reduction 50%, but if you have 0 energy, that damage reduction is not gonna apply, and it drains your energy rapidly as you take hits. So probably not the best idea. A Gromril is not a bad idea either for some damage reduction, but you have to pick up Bloodburst Orbs, and then there's a Siege Breaker again. You have to pick up Bloodburst Orbs, but it's gonna give some damage. My suggested ideal setup is those 2 rings and this necklace, but you might modify based on what you prefer. Now, ideal rolls for this and for the other set would be cooldown reduction, priority 1 on the helmet, priority 2 HP, priority 3 or 2 as well is counter attack damage. The rest is fewers, but cost reduction really does help as a fewer. So if you want to pick which fewer has the highest priority, cost reduction. Then chest and leg armor, the exact same thing applies. I'm gonna say it only once. So priority number 1 HP. Priority number 2 counter attack damage. Priority number 3 probably armor, and then there's the fewers. Then for the boots you have movement speed bonus as an option, but priority number 1 HP, priority number 2 counter attack damage, priority number 3 armor, and then there's the fewers, but movement speed maybe is the highest priority in the fewer department if you feel like you need it. Then challenge bracers for those, or the Wastsong bracers, those can give you damage and crit damage. which means you would want that damage. The crit damage you can sacrifice and not prioritize that much, but priority number 1 here is damage. Priority number 2 and 3 would be HP and counterattack damage, and then after that you would want armor, maybe crit damage to prioritize, and then maybe some cost reduction or other fewer. Now the rings can get the exact same stats as the necklace, except the necklace can also give you armor. So what you would want as high priority on those would be crit chance number 1. Number 2 would be cooldown reduction. Number 3 would be damage and HP. And then after that things like armor piercing, health drain, crit damage would not be bad. Even armor is an okay fewer, or cool, or what was I about to say, or cost reduction. Those work well. So the same thing I said about the pendant applies to the rings, except to remove the armor. Now for the axes you want high priority cooldown reduction and crit chance. And you can see here I've decided to get an axe that uses that gives me cooldown reduction versus one that gives me crit chance. Ideally I would have one with both of them. So priority number 1 I would say cooldown, priority number 2 crit chance, priority number 3 damage, number 4 would be HP, and then counterattack damage. And then after that you want things like health drain, armor piercing, maybe crit damage, things like that as viewers, things that that would benefit you. So that's pretty much it regarding what you might want in the axes and in all the pieces. And the other set I suggest is the Last Song set. The exact same rules apply to that set as this set. So that's pretty much it for the gear. Let's quickly talk about blessings. I try to keep my HP high enough. And in some pieces you might want to go full on HP. And full on HP is just 6 green pieces with the God token. God tokens you get from bosses and end of map enemies. Now, if you want counterattack damage, and you want counterattack damage in 3 pieces, I found for me the best balance between damage and crit damage from the counterattack damage would be 3 pieces of equipment blessed for counterattack, the rest for the combination of damage and HP. So this is the combo you use. Green, blue, green, green, blue, green on both sides with the God token. Now if you want HP, there's 3 versions. One of them gives you 8000 HP and 3.6k damage. Another one gives you 4k damage, 6k HP, and then there's 4.4k damage and 4k HP. So choose whichever you like. If you want more damage, of course, more red. If you want more HP, more green. But find your balance. I prefer to have a little bit more HP sometimes, so you might even want to consider doing something like this to some of the pieces if you really need that HP, if you don't have enough green items to survive Chaos 9. But ideally you won't be using that on Chaos 9, but rather on Chaos 8. Just losing 300 wood quality when you're doing something around 10,000 is not gonna be that big of a deal. So that's it about the blessings, the items and all of that. Next you're gonna see some more gameplay footage of the build and suggestions how to combine the skills and how to do the rotation. So here we are at the segment where I show you a little bit more gameplay footage, tell you how I do my rotations, how I combo certain skills, and just in general how to use the build. You can see the burst potential of the build is very nice if you immediately stun an enemy to make them bleed, and then use Blood of the Mountain, and then while Blood of the Mountain is going on, if you want to soak up some hits, use the invulnerability, so you can just keep standing in front of the enemy and get it to take that extra damage. Again, it's not as good as a Strike of the Anvil build, which can do 115, 20 million damage in certain situations solo. With those 2 sets, I've tested it and I can tell you those 2 sets are amazing in either option. So you can see there's some nice burst, as I said. The synergy is nice. You can modify certain things like like the Avenging Charge for Code to Out, or the God skills can be replaced. Basically what you do is go into the enemies, use your healing skill, or should we call just Was Bastion with its name, so you know what I'm talking about. So use Was Bastion, which stuns the enemies, it causes them to bleed. Then you use Blood of the Mountain and make sure you're focusing the enemy and facing it. If you're not facing the enemy, stop spinning quickly and just try to use a basic attack. It would immediately rotate you towards the enemy, then you can continue spinning. And again, use the invulnerability when it's needed. Use the stunning, the regular cooldown skills, whether it's Was Bastion or Code to Out. Use those as soon as you can, or save them for situations where you want to. For example, on bosses you might want to save the stun exactly when they're using a healing or a nasty skill you want to interrupt. When it's about the last song set, it's still the same way how you want to play it. You just have a little less wiggle room with the skills due to having less points, but overall it's the exact same story. Stun them, make them bleed, do the DPS burst. Use invulnerability when needed and keep spamming the skills and keep spinning, and use the Avenging Charge if you want to get out of danger, if you are using it in your skill bar. The damage is, as you can see, more than enough to burst elites quickly on Chaos 9, especially when you stack all the damage sources, all the buffs on you. Try not to die, because with the Victor's Tribute, if you die, you're losing all those damage bonuses. So sometimes it's better to just avoid doing damage for a few seconds, and avoid getting hit for those seconds, and then when you're ready, go back in, pump that invulnerability, stun the boss, and just keep spinning and keep DPSing. And pretty nice. I think many of you would enjoy it. I know I love spin to win builds in any game. If you've enjoyed this video and want to be notified for when I upload more content like this for this game or other wooters of the hack and slash or shooter wooter variety, you could subscribe to my channel to get those content updates, and you can get notified by clicking on the bell button as well. So hope you enjoyed it. Hope everything was clear. If something wasn't, share your comments, questions, etc. in the section below. Keep it cool, folks. Thank you for watching, and until next time, goodbye.